Hey, it is great to be here today. I don't know about you all, but I'm still recovering from this morning. I was completely moved by the resiliency panel. Man, that is long overdue and desperately needed. Thanks, General Miller. Thanks, General Hurry. Thank you to everyone who's making a difference in the lives of other people and checking people's sicks, taking good care of folks. That's what it's all about. I've been involved with LOA for a long time, and I love it. I love being a loggie. And I love being a loggie because we get it done. And these people up here today, yeah, we're from industry. Guess what? We bleed the same as you and care about our nation the same as you. Okay? Don't ever forget that. We're here for you in any capacity needed. We're all on the same team. And I am adamant about government, industry, and academia working together to solve our nation's challenges, especially in the logistics community. We have a great panel here today. I'm sure you recognize some of the faces. First of all, Jonathan Bland. He's Director of AMC Programs at Mass Virtual, and in this capacity is responsible for customer care and fulfilling requirements for one of Mass Virtual's key customers. Prior to joining Mass Virtual, Jonathan served 28 years in the United States Air Force, retiring at the rank of Colonel as the Associate Director for Logistics, Engineering, and Force Protection at Air Mobility Command. He served as both a developmental engineer and a career maintenance officer, having commanded 2 maintenance groups and 3 squadrons, including while deployed in support of combat operations. Lisa Crego, who challenged me and said she'd give me $10 if I called her Lisa Stratego, so you now owe me, I told you I was gonna do it, you owe me $10. Lisa Crego, Vice President, Government Services Business Development, Boeing Global Services, is responsible for a diverse portfolio encompassing all domestic and international government and defense service sales. She returned to Boeing after 6 years with Northrop Grumman, where she served in a series of senior business development, business capture, and program management roles. During her first tour at Boeing, which spanned for 14 years, Ms. Crego led business development teams representing the mobility and surveillance, missile and weapons, unmanned systems, network and security, and commercial derivative portfolios for both domestic and international customers. And finally, we have Evan Miller. Evan is the Vice President for F-35 Sustainment Integration at Lockheed Martin Aeronautics Company. And in this capacity, he's responsible for integrating worldwide sustainment operations to address 21st century security challenges by developing and delivering sustainment solutions that meet joint program officer and customer requirements. Prior to joining Lockheed, Mr. Miller, who I knew as Brigadier General Miller, served for 30 years with the Air Force, retiring at the rank of Brigadier General. And in his last position, he served as the Director for Logistics, Engineering, and Security Cooperation for the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, overseeing all joint planning and staff functions for logistics and engineering, including foreign military sales. So we got a great panel, and really encourage you to ask questions. Again, this is a great organization, and it takes everybody to make it as great as it is. So please keep that in mind, and we'll move into some questions. Actually, let's start with some opening comments. So Jonathan, over to you.
I just want to say huge thanks to LOA for this opportunity and for that awesome introduction of Kevin, our moderator. I feel like you should be coming off the top ropes on that, you know, it's a WWE thing. But it really is a personal honor to be here, to be able to speak with you. And so I hope that our comments today are useful and encouraging. Thank you.
Ms. Stratego?
Yeah, I feel like I have a new call sign here. So, you know, again, echo kind of the thanks to LOA and to everyone being here. It is my first year here, so thanks for making me feel so welcome and letting me join you guys on the panel.
No, fantastic, and I would like to echo a thanks to LOA, thanks to the entire team that works very hard to put together this symposium. Thanks to my fellow panel members. Thanks to Kevin for all his work. And really thanks to everybody in the room for what you do every day to keep our nation safe and to think about these difficult problems, and for contributing your time and energy to the forums, to the meetings, to the content as it got developed for the symposium. And it's just really an honor for me to be here. I've been a part of LOA for a long time, and it's wonderful to see it get better and better and better each year. I'd also really be remiss if I didn't echo Kevin's comments. I think what we saw in the human resiliency panel was one of the finest discussions and most powerful experiences I've had as part of LOA. And that's been more than 20 years. I started years ago as a chapter president at Dyess Air Force Base in the 90s. And I feel like that was one of the things that maybe has been missing for so long, but it's the human aspect of what we do and how we do it, the connections we make here at LOA. And I'm really honored to be here. And I look forward to this event every year to reestablish, rebuild, strengthen, and create new connections with the people that I meet and the folks that I see. And just a huge thank you to LOA and to all of you for being here and spending your time and energy and intellectual horsepower to make us all better. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we talked a lot when General Minahan was here about contested logistics and the challenges that we know we're going to be facing, likely to face in the not so distant future. And there are many, many complexities to operating logistically in a contested environment. So, Jonathan, the company that you work for, Mass Virtual, is all about virtual reality software. Mm-hmm. That's probably not the first thing that comes to people's minds when they think about how do we operate in a contested logistics environment. Tell us a little bit about what you do in the company, what the company does, and how it contributes to us being able to operate in a contested environment. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. I imagine that there are some in the crowd who think that we are the odd one out here on this topic, but here's how I like to think about it. In order to win in the next fight in that contested logistics environment that the service is going to have to deal with, you only have to master two things: new and faster, right? Piece of cake. Just master those two things and you'll be successful. New threats, new environments, new technologies, new airmen, new multi-capable airman skills, new operating concepts, et cetera, et cetera. And you need to master them faster because the enemy's not going to wait for you and because those news are changing faster than ever before, right? So that can be fairly daunting, I'm sure, to those who are in the service. But the good news, the encouraging news to me is that you guys are figuring that stuff out. I mean, we've seen it here all week. I read about it in the news. You guys are figuring out how to win in that environment. But you have to do more than just figure it out. You and your airmen have to be ready to execute what you figure out. And so the readiness only comes through training. And that's why Mass Virtual is excited to be able to provide virtual reality training to your airmen. We have been for the last couple of years and we continue to, because our friends at Dyess proved, looking at the old way they used to train maintainers as a use case, and using virtual reality, airmen are able to learn faster, significantly faster. They retain more. And as a result, when they go to the flight line, they need to tie up operational assets, airplanes, less. And so you can keep those airplanes in the fight. Because it's software, virtual reality training can be updated at the speed of relevance, right? You can bolt modules together to create multi-capable airman training. You can take it with you wherever you go in the world. If you need to go to a disconnected island chain somewhere that doesn't have internet, you can take that training with you in order to dust off the cobwebs. So it's able to help you keep up with that new and faster and keep that readiness where it needs to be.
Okay, great. Lisa, so with your company, obviously there's aircraft that are in the inventory that have been produced by your company years ago, still flying, right? And then we have new platforms coming out. So to operate in this contested environment, how do you approach that as far as the mix of the older and the newer Air Force aircraft? What can you do, what can industry do to help keep those older and newer aircraft operating in a new environment that we're not used to? Well, what specific actions can Boeing take to make that happen?
Yeah, great. Definitely, like you said, we have just such a breadth of aircraft systems out there, right, at all different stages of their life. some probably older than I am, when they were drafted with, kind of pencils and draft paper and, closets full of, designs, where every aircraft was unique. Everyone was different. Like it wasn't the CAD modern design that we have today. So, so I know, that we're trying to work with that generation of aircraft, modernize it along the way, as well as some of, our more modern aircraft to our commercial derivatives, like the KC-46, right? Taking advantage of, that CAD design where every commercial aircraft looks and feels the same. And then going in even into some new modern generation of digitally designed digital twin aircraft like the T-7. So, and then designing for even the future next gen systems. So, like you said, huge spectrum of aircraft, very different in how they respond and the requirements that they need. I think we're, spending a lot of IRAD to really, how do we make some of those older aircraft relevant, modernized? How do we get more data off of those aircraft? How do we help them be, a little bit more predictable in their supply chain and working with folks on those, as well as those pre-digital aircraft like the C-17 working the ADR. We have millions of hours of flight data on that aircraft, right? So how can we use the data we already have to really be a little bit more predictive? And then going, into kind of the data that's already designed in to come off some of these, more modern platforms, and really then use our digital tools in that predictive element to do that. So I think when we talk about the geography, the distance, creating that logistics chain and that pull, making sure that we just don't wait for something to break, but we take the best athlete with us, So I think, again, we're learning, we're continuing to learn how to do that, but really, we're doing this with the aircraft we have right now. So we can talk a lot about some of the next gen design systems, but, again, it's making the aircraft that are out there flying relevant today, and, making sure that the folks out there have what they need to get them up in the air and flying.
Great, thank you. So, Evan, you and I have been around for a while, right? Maybe, I don't know if General Zettler's still in the crowd, but I don't go back to Vietnam, although people probably look at me and think I go back to Vietnam, or Civil War, my wife would probably say. But my question is, with this potential threat that we have coming up, it's a different type of environment than what we had, in the 90s with Desert Storm and other things that we've done, where we really had solid control of the skies for the most part. But going into the situation with a near peer competitor in this very contested environment, what are you guys doing at Lockheed? What can industry as a whole do, whether it's Lockheed, Boeing, whatever? What can you do to prepare for a very different environment where we're going to be facing the type of challenges that we really haven't had to face in quite a long time?
Yeah, well, thanks, Kevin. So with any difficult, complex problem, I think step one is we collectively need to understand the threat. The theme today and this conference is persistent mission generation under attack. You hear the terms resilient logistics in contested environments, and you hear contested environments, or you hear JADO, and we've got a large lexicon that is growing faster every day. But first, I think we need to understand as a logistics community, first maybe a service-centric, then a joint, then a combined logistics environment. First, understand what we mean and how really complicated that problem is. Jonathan did a great job, I thought, very interestingly, talking about new and faster. But when you start to pull the problem apart and really think about what it means, what does under attack mean for logisticians and maintainers, I think step one is first understanding, and we're doing a lot of that in Lockheed Martin, but I know just walking through the industry hall that everybody is really trying to get their arms around that, but it's got to have I think, a greater common understanding of what we're up against. And you can think about that in a lot of different ways. The product support elements, or think about them in our functional disciplines of maintenance, logistics plans, supply, and then understand what under attack means. Historically, in my military career, most of the under attack meant a kinetic attack. And now we're talking about holding things at risk, both kinetically and non-kinetically or digitally. And how do we recover? How do we generate resiliency from that? How do we generate resiliency for our people, our processes, our products, and our weapon systems? So number one, I think, is to first understand what we're up against. And that's why I think LOA is so valuable. The second, I think, is collaborate, talk together, engage in conversation about what it means. You really have to understand what industry can bring to bear, what are inherently organic and inherently governmental responsibilities, and where do we find that sweet spot of working together and thinking differently about this problem set. The third part, I think, that we can actually do, we are doing a lot of, Lisa mentioned IRAD. We're also pursuing a lot of IRAD, a lot of investment, a lot of thinking. But I think we could improve collectively as a team in how we do cooperative research and development agreements and really focus some of those on some of the more difficult and harder to solve logistics challenges when we're under attack, when multi-capable airmen are facing life-threatening situations in a condition or at a location that they're not used to operating from. But working on not only collaborating, but cooperating together. And that's where I think creators are a great opportunity to do that. And beyond that, we've got to partner. I've heard that a lot, either both up here on the main stage. I think we have to partner because, as General Hawkins said in the previous presentation, it will take all of us. This is an extremely difficult problem, and we all have to play our part, enter into that fight, not only with our experience and our intellectual capabilities, our scientific breakthroughs, our capabilities, our grit and determination, but it's all got to come together in partnerships that create win-win situations. And so again, as an old Army boss of mine used to say, we'll either think our way into a new way of working, which will be effective and will allow us to seize initiative and seize the day, so to speak, in a future conflict, or we will find ourselves working our way into a new way of thinking, not having enough resources, not having them in the right place, not having people trained the right way, not having the capabilities or the skills the right way, not having things integrated the way they should be. And if we don't think our way into a new way of working and a better way of dealing with persistent mission generation under attack, we will end up working our way into a new way of thinking, just making do with what we have. And again, so I'm really proud, certainly within Lockheed. I'm very familiar with the things we're doing in terms of IRAD, developing edge technologies, understanding how all those things connect. They're great companies that are in the industry hall. I think in our DNA at Lockheed is integration. Sensor fusion, you think about that when you think about our platforms, you think about operational sensor fusion. We're now starting to think about logistics interoperability. You think about that on an F-35, it sort of was conceived with the idea that we want more logistics interoperability. And that's a force multiplier. But again, I think we've got to understand the problem set. We've got to collaborate, then cooperate together, generate some partnerships, and think our way into a new way of working.
Good, thanks. There's a lot of really great companies out in the exhibition floor, and I've tried to visit with most of them. And there's a RAISE section. If you haven't been into it, you probably have, but if you haven't, there's a lot of training related things up on the RAISE section out there in the exhibition floor. And there was a lot of cool things happening inside the military to try to kind of advance how we train our folks, right? But your company brings very interesting, exciting way of training people. And I think especially the younger generation really likes that. I mean, that's what they expect. That's what they need, and that's what they expect. But training is, usually, inherently, it's a military function, right? So point blank, why should your company be the one to provide the VR content? Why is that something that we can't do inside the service, or how do we work that mix between industry and our service to provide the content that's necessary for this type of training?
Yeah, it's actually a question that I hear a lot. And it's a question that I think we wrestle with every industry at one time or another, right? Where do we draw the line between what the Air Force should do itself and what should it outsource? And sometimes that changes by the industry over the years. But what's interesting lately, why we get that question so often, is there are some really awesome airmen out in your organizations who have the motivation and the passion to go teach themselves how to do these things, and they have created some pretty compelling content. Right, I've seen some of their examples online, and to me that warms my heart, right? That there are airmen who are able to sit there, in their free time, learn something that awesome. The problem is that we don't resource those airmen to produce on the speed and scale that we need them to for a training program, right? It contributes to the whole, but you can't look at these airmen on a part-time basis and say, redo our whole training program for the logistics career field. There aren't enough of them, right? Even if you look at an organization like Bespin, which is incredible and actually has programmers, Air Force AFSC programmers in it, they do great stuff, but they aren't resourced for that speed and scale. And so, plus, they don't have the relevant industry experience. They aren't up to date on the technology like industry partners are. And so I love it when those airmen, instead of being leaned upon by the Air Force to go produce in their spare time, are made our partners, because when they team with us, it's incredible what we can produce. We've got some airmen down at Dias. Staff Sergeant Hicks down at Dias is incredible, the passion that he has. Master Sergeant Fitzgerald at Little Rock, when they work with us instead of competing with us on who can create the better thing, and they actually help us understand their needs better, it's amazing what we can produce. And so that's what I would say. Use us for what we're awesome at. We share the same passion,
Right.
And we have the expertise that the Air Force lacks.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
So Lisa, obviously the discussion today is about contested environment, operating logistics functions in a much different environment than what we have in the past. And we're talking during the LOA symposium about agile combat employment. It's one of the terms and things that the Air Force is trying to fully implement across the service. So can you give me an idea of some tools and specific capabilities that you think industry can bring to the fight to actually, bring those concepts and that new look into being? How does industry contribute to that?
Yeah, thanks. So I think, obviously we're picking up on a theme of the unity of effort and pulling that thread from a lot of our discussion, right? And I think, we've all commented a little bit on partnerships as well. And so I think it's really important from an industry perspective and as an industrialist, that we do play well together too, right? And, it's not just always competitiveness. I think, there's also that element of partnering with the customer community, bringing, kind of the cool technologies that we're talking about from the commercial side as well. So, I think as we talk about the contested logistics, I know we've talked a lot about geography matters, right? We're talking far away, theaters and how do we kind of forward deploy or use some of these partnerships. So, I think part of it is, it's not just that like paradigm in the technology, and we've talked about the modeling and, the kind of the digital thread and the velocity of technology that's available to us today. But I think it's also, how do we use our allies differently, right? How do we use our distribution differently to really kind of get at, again, increasing that velocity, that tempo to get the right, parts there at the right time and not necessarily, bringing them always back, right? How do we use our global fleet partners that have common parts, common training, common, how do we think about that a little bit differently? Because I think, again, as we're talking just the space and, to do that, it's not just, kind of our home base, right? But how do we, again, push that forward? So, I think, again, we're talking a lot about some of the tools and, the great things that we're doing for training or for maintenance and, reaching back, whether it's, kind of virtual environment and bringing that to them, just in time. But, I think, again, it's just thinking a little bit differently on how we access that space.
Yeah, you said something that caught my attention. You talked about allies and partners just briefly. But I remember General Minahan mentioned that too. In fact, I think it was General Minahan who said, okay, how many sailors do we have? There's like one person clapped, and then how many soldiers? And again, one person. And so if you're not familiar with the term, you probably are, but integrated deterrence, that's a pretty big term, right? But part of that is not just inside, the United States Air Force, but across the joint community and our partners and allies. Yeah. And this is in no way at all a dig anywhere, but we have a great association here, but the great predominance of folks that attend this are from the Air Force. But it's going to take a lot more than just the Air Force to make us be able to compete and win in this next conflict or war, if you want to go that far. And so it's important that as we consider all the things that we're doing internally to cater to how the Air Force logistics community moves forward, we need to keep in mind that it's not just us. Yeah. Now, I'm an airman through and through, but as I've been out and about, retired 5 years now, man, I'll tell you what, there's some cool stuff going on in the other services too. And we need to all partner together with those other services and with our partners and allies, because it's not, just the Americans from the United States of America that have good ideas here, right? So I'm up on my grandstand here because I can. In fact, I'd like to go on to that just a few more minutes. No, but I just want to say that it's important, I think, that as we as industry work together to try to make our nation stronger, that we look at it from a joint perspective and with other partners and allies.
Yeah, and I think, just take that just as an example. We had some of the Australian come by, right? E7. Right. I've worked E7 for a long time. And so that's a really proud moment, right? You have an ally, a partner there that's leading the way. And, we're obviously really excited about the Air Force E7 discussion. But, again, I'm sure, with the global fleets and some of the different tours that you all have had, you feel it too.
Right. Well, a lot of us have worked with the other services, and we know it's a joint fight, and it's really partners and allies included. So, Evan, what's happening at Lockheed that you're doing to effectively support products that are probably going to be used in that near peer contested environment? I mean, can you give us some specific examples of things that are happening inside your company to address that?
Yeah, great question again, and I'll try to draw a couple of parallels with what Lisa was talking about and your comment about, because I believe, certainly with my experience, that we'll never get into a conflict that's not joint and combined, and we need to work with our partners and allies. We've got to get better, and that's why I think we're all getting more and more familiar with the joint concept for contested logistics, and what the joint logistics enterprise has to bring to bear for any capability to be able to provide effects and really understand what effects-based operations looks like. And so for me, that begins to talk about connections. And specifically for Lockheed, I mentioned before, in our DNA is integration. putting systems together, having the F-35 act as a sensor and doing so much more than being a typical tactical fighter. But connections, the connections we make on this panel, the connections we make through LOA, connections are huge. And as we all know, there are absolutely no point solutions. So I guess I'd point you back when I talk about what Lockheed is doing. We're doing a lot right now just to support the war in Ukraine. Think about javelins and you hear F-16s in the news, but javelins and HIMARS and the list goes on, and many folks are contributing to that. But those lessons are teaching us how to be more connected, how to connect systems, how to move them faster, how to think about our supply chain and our supply base and how to energize that faster. What do we need to do to think differently about that? It falls under the umbrella of what our president and CEO, Jim Takelet, talks about in terms of 21st century security and 21st century security or sustainment solutions. And one of the things that I really like, and many of you probably have seen it, is the concept of being ahead of ready. So that's all about working together, being connected to the joint force, to the combined force, to our sister services, and being able to understand the need, anticipate that, and stay ahead of readiness. And so that's occupying a lot of time in terms of what are those edge technologies that can speed maintenance. That's one way to improve the speed of how we can generate missions. Another way is how do we make inspections, for instance, more repeatable? Or how do we take those multi-skilled airmen and physically take them out of harm's way? Because all of you understand, whether you're a logistician or a maintainer, logistics is a physical business. You have to do physical work. And when you can take, logisticians and maintainers out of that physical equation, inspect an airplane faster with a drone and more repeatably, use data and use technology to understand what kind of airplane you've got in front of you, not through a bright light and a mirror, but through a sophisticated capability that can inspect faster and more repeatably. You're able to understand where you are better, and then make better, faster, higher quality logistics decisions and recommendations to either your immediate supervisor right there on the flight line with you, or in some cases, those logistics decisions and recommendations have to make their way up to a headquarters to adjudicate resource allocations and things like that. But the faster we can do that, the better off we are. And we can only do that if we're connected, if we can share data, and think about our problem sets differently. So when I think about that question, I think about all the things that we're doing to stay ahead of ready by connecting sensors, logisticians, decision makers, parts of the supply chain to more effectively respond to the threat. But there's a long way to go. There's a lot to do, and we've got to be able to plug into frankly, a greater ecosystem for it to be effective across the joint force, and even better, an ecosystem that takes us across the combined force and allows us to work more seamlessly with our partners and allies. Because again, it gets back to what Jonathan talked about. It's got to be fast. We have to operate at the speed of relevance. And today, a lot of our processes just don't get there fast enough. And we see that, and we've learned that. And certainly we at Lockheed Martin are trying to push that envelope, understand our edge technologies, and connect that all the way back to decision support tools, how we effectively manage the supply chain, how we look for economies of scale and resiliency. But it is a difficult problem set, no two ways about it. And again, the connections, both digital and physical, the connections we make as people working this problem, and the connections we make digitally will make us better at that. And those are some of the things that Lockheed's doing to stay ahead of ready.
Okay. So I'm going to probably ask a variation to each of you three on this, just to give you a heads up. But what do you need from the folks in the audience and those that are not here but are here in spirit across our great service and nation? What can you get from them that will help you serve them better?
Yeah, that's an easy one.
Okay,
Now that I'm sitting here, that's an easy one. Talk to us, right? We've hit on it a little bit before. Talk to us. Because we can't read your minds, but we want to know what you're thinking about. We want to know what you need so that we can help you provide that. When I was sitting out there, as I was coming up through the Air Force, I was, I think, subliminally trained to fear industry. Because if I said the wrong thing in their presence, they were going to send me a bill for it, right? They're all out to gouge me. And Lieutenant, you're going to have to pay that bill. Now, it wasn't true back then, and it's not true today, but it's so much easier to see over here that there is a fear in some parts of the Air Force. So I want to encourage all the airmen out there to not be afraid of speaking to industry. Because industry is made up of, I think you said it, we're made up of patriots just like you that want to make this nation safe and want to arm you with the most awesome things that we can. But we don't know how to do that unless we know what you need. Or sometimes you don't know how to do it and we might. And so if we have that conversation, then we can get there. And so I would encourage you to find the companies out there that have the same spirit as you, that have the same core values as you, that have the same passion to get to where you want to go, the ones that treat you like you want to be treated, and talk to them.
yeah, that is spot on. My transition out of the Air Force after 37 years was not super smooth. I don't think I paid attention or asked for enough advice. It's not that it wasn't there. I just probably had my head in the sand too much. I will tell for the folks that are, either going to be separating or retiring, yeah, we're good folks too. But you do have to find that right culture to have that smooth transition.
Sure.
And if you make a mistake, it's okay. I think I've read somewhere or heard somewhere that the average service member, maybe moves to 3 different companies like in the first 5 years. Obviously, that doesn't apply to everybody, some less, some more, whatever the case may be. But it is exceptionally important to find that next, chapter 2.0, something that's going to make you happy, that you can be aligned with and really believe in. Because, when you're inside the government, whether you're wearing the uniform or a suit or whatever the case may be, you're all in, right? That's what you're doing. And you want to have that same kind of fit on the outside.
Yeah, and
right?
it's there.
It is there. You just got to find it. So so Lisa, for you, I don't think you ever served in the military. Am I wrong about that?
Correct.
But do you love our nation?
I love our nation.
Do you want to do the right thing?
I want to do the right thing.
Okay.
I'm in it to win.
What do you need from our folks?
No, I mean, again, I really love the conversation because it is about communication, right? And there's nothing more frustrating than being in industry and not knowing what will benefit you, right? We do have a lot of resources. We have a lot of smart people that love complex problems, right? And problem solving. And so, but it's really difficult from an industry standpoint to make those investments, as a gamble. And I think this is what you need. And, I've also watched it where we aren't communicating. In industry, we will use our resources and we are so far off of what you need because I've designed an exquisite device and you just needed a pencil, right? And so, again, I just really want to encourage the trust and the leaning in a bit. And, one of the things I know many of our companies do is also bringing operators into our company to help our engineers understand the dynamics and what you need. Because again, I think it's that communication and that understanding that really will benefit all of us. And there was a little bit of discussion earlier this week too on some of the earlier generation folks out there on some spark ideas, right? Like we're not necessarily going to figure it out with us sitting here or on my leadership team, but you're out there, you're in the field. What's going on? What's your hurt statement, right? And but if we don't know about it, we can't act together to solve that for you. So again, I'm just really encouraged that we're sitting up here, that you know that we're all here together and having these conversations, because that's what we can take away and improve on.
Right. Boy, communication is just so important, and trust. You referenced trust. And Jonathan, you know, we were all raised the same way. Don't say that because they're going to interpret it as, you know, you've asked me to build this or do this. And I think, you know, I've heard a lot of senior leaders speak, I don't know, I'd say like the last 2 or 3 years especially. I've noticed a change in the tone coming from the top where they're much more, hey, we want to work with industry. We need to get your help for, you know, whatever the constraints are. But sometimes that doesn't always, you know, bubble down to other areas. And so that is something that I would ask is that just give us some time to listen to what your problems are. We may or may not be the right company or the right situation to help you out, but we care, and we just ask that you know, we have that trust back and forth. And I know, you know, the senior leaders in this room in our community are great with that. And I would just ask for everybody to follow that lead. I guess, Evan, you know, geez, I think everybody's probably heard of Lockheed before, right?
Possible.
Pretty well-known company. And I'm not trying to throw you a curveball here, but I mean, it's a tough situation sometimes, right? Things get taken out of context, or there's something in media, or you know, whatever, and it contributes to the issue of trust.
It does.
So. I mean, I know you well. I worked for you on LOA, and we're just, you know you very well. You're a stand-up guy, as much as they come. Definitely. How do you overcome that challenge in trust and listening, you know, soliciting and receiving feedback that you then take back to your company and say, listen, we need to do this. How do we come together as a nation, government, academia, and industry to really push us forward?
Yeah, no, this is you know, it's a question we all wrestle with all the time. You know, I sometimes critique when I'm given the opportunity to do really neat things like this. I feel myself mentally, you know, drifting back into uniform, and maybe my, you know, the way I convey, you know, my thoughts are different. But I think we all kind of know the answer to that. I think the best way to establish trust is back and forth discussion and being open and honest with what we need. And I think it's, you know, understanding where entities in a relationship can contribute to each other. You know, I think, you know, one of industry's big roles in this contested warfighting environment is, again, something that you see in Ukraine. The endurance of our warfighting forces and our capabilities rest with industry to continue to prime the pump, to create the heart and lungs, so to speak, that'll allow, you know, a force to stay engaged, to continue to seize the initiative with support, engineering support, supply chain support, and things that will keep forces in the fight and support those at the edge that are engaged in lethal combat. But to get to that level of trust, you know, I think it's as simple as thinking about, you know, think about March Madness, or think about the baseball season starting. World-class teams understand who their teammates are, and they know a lot about them, and they trust what they do, and they trust them to the point when you get to the Final Four, for instance, you know, they're not practicing simple passes and layups. You know, they can do no-look passes. They can work with each other, understand what they want. And again, when we talk about this contested environment, when you think about the technologies required to securely communicate, for instance, to use things like 5G or what have you, to be able to do that and to understand what it means to logistics and what it means to operations requires a different level of thinking. It requires a different level of collaboration and understanding the problems. So if we talk more often, first we'll better understand. Then when we run into those friction points and difficulties and tough discussions, whether it's contract negotiations or just fundamentally not understanding what's needed at that moment for that particular mission, then I think we start to establish the trust that says, hey, you're going to go off and do what you think is best. And in both cases, we'll go off and do what we think is best. But again, as with any good team, there's going to be some forming, norming, storming until you get to the performing level. And if we're not engaged, we don't stand a chance to get through that storm and get to a place where we will find common ground, find those win-wins, understand what our individual, not individual, but our collective expertise is, but how each of us contributes to that. And so to build trust, it takes time, it takes patience. I would tell you one of the reasons I love working for Lockheed right now is, that was the first company I hired onto when I retired, and I looked around and the culture and the people, exactly as Jonathan and Lisa mentioned, we have just exceptionally brilliant people that can solve all kinds of problems. But most of the things that I see come down to communication. If we communicate with each other, I think we will work our way through. We'll build that level of trust. And again, I think we're in, maybe I'm not reading the situation quite right, but I think we're in an era where, most of the things we acquire and we go after are things we can hold in our hands and we can look at and we can move around. And what we're talking about within this symposium and across the Joint Logistics Enterprise are these, resilient, gritty, strong processes and capabilities and people that all come together, that have all kinds of vulnerabilities. And the trust has got to be that thing that holds us together, because again, when you're in a system of systems that is vulnerable enough, and when you think about what General Alvin talked about, for want of a nail, it's a little thing that can undercut our combat capability. And without trust, we won't be able to have people that will go find that thing and go get that nail wherever it is, without being asked or without knowing about it, until we get to the point of no look passes and we have the level of trust. But again, that comes from communication, and I find myself, wanting to know more, because I've heard all week all the fantastic things that are going on with other industry partners, but also inside, some of the offices in the wings and at the headquarters that are just doing remarkable things. And we've got to understand that better to know how we can fit more effectively as a partner, and then make the combat capability realize its full potential.
Okay, so we have 11 minutes and 22 seconds. Can we do a few questions? And then I'd like to reserve maybe 5 minutes at the end just for some closing comments. So I'm not sure who's got questions out there. Is that you, Jenna? I can't tell.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
me. Okay, so we do have some questions from the audience, and I am trying to group them because there were some common themes. So Kevin, at the beginning you mentioned the resiliency panel, and obviously these are all very successful companies. So there were a couple of questions about what do you do differently in your companies that the Air Force can learn from?
What do we do differently in our companies that the Air Force could learn from? I'm laughing to myself because my company is about as different from the Air Force as I can imagine, right? Our company is made up of very young programmers and computer artists who are geniuses at what they do, but the culture is very different. And so as an old retired Air Force guy going into that culture, was a transition for me, right? To be able to find a way to relate to those folks. But the family that I entered was just unlike any organization I've been in a very long time. The Air Force is a tight-knit family, but we all think alike. We're all sort of molded into the same shape, I would say. I'm an introvert, right? But the Air Force has trained me to be an extrovert when I need to be, right? So that I can look like everybody else and operate like everybody else. And so what I've learned by being a Mass Virtual is how to be in an organization that is made up of all kinds of personalities and all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of aspirations. And just love each other and figure out where do we need to go, what do we need to do, who needs help, and let's go get it done. And I think the Air Force is working along that path. I think that it has made a lot of strides, certainly than I was, from when I was a second lieutenant at doing that. But it's something that I think the Air Force could still get better at.
Okay.
Thank you. And this week, we had a focus on skill bridge and transition and how people continue to serve. And so we had a question: how can transitioning military most effectively capture their experience in order to continue to serve in industry?
So I'll jump on that too.
I can answer that. I was trying to give you guys a chance.
Yeah, because I did it not very long ago. And for me, the trick was, it's going to sound familiar, talk to people, right? I talked to a lot of people in industry, and I said, help me understand your world. Help me understand what do I do that I think is valuable, and how is it valuable to a new customer, and just to understand it better.
So I'm going to use this for a bit here. If you don't follow a guy, if you're not on LinkedIn, you need to get on LinkedIn. If you don't follow a guy named Michael Quinn, you need to. Okay, probably a lot of you do. He is exceptional on giving advice about transitioning service members. And I'll tell you what, every one of you are going to transition at some point. So he has a lot of great advice. What I personally would give advice on is just talk to folks. If someone offers to help you transition or fill you in on what their journey was, the good, the bad, the ugly, don't shine them on, because you will get many, many different inputs from folks, but you take the slices that make sense to you and you form that picture and you listen to the advice that's given. It's free advice, right? Yeah. Take advantage of it. Get involved with other organizations. I'm on the LOA board, gray beard now, but there's another organization. I'm going to make a pitch for it. NDIA, National Defense Industrial Association, NDIA. I had never heard of it until I was about 6 months out from retiring. That will help you get connected to many people across industry and be aware of what's going on out in industry. There is a division inside NDIA called the Logistics Management Division that focuses on this community. And I happen to be, I'm the vice chair for that. But don't wait until 2 months before you're retiring or separating to try to understand what's going on out in industry. Get ahead of it. Listen to people. Get involved in organizations that deal with where you want to go. That's my quick opinion.
Yeah, I'd add very quickly, when I retired, I did not have any preconceived notion that I would go back into the defense industry or certainly go to Lockheed Martin. I looked for what it is that would wake me up in the morning and get me energized. I had great advice when I was a young officer, and I was wondering, hey, what do you think I should do? And he said, doesn't matter what I think you should do, is what my boss told me. He said, find those things that get you energized and get you charged up, and try your best in what you're doing today. And that'll be the best way that will help you get to places to do the things you want to do. And then as I was retiring, there are lots of programs out there that not only help through the transition, but also that will help within industry to make that transition if that's something you want to do. And again, do your homework. Really think through what options there are. you know, what kind of folks you want to work around, how you want to contribute. And I think that helps you make the best decision, and then use your connections to talk to people. And you know, my story is I landed at Lockheed was just a cold call to a former peer and then boss, and one thing led to another. So.
Yeah, and I mean, just kind of to add on from, you know, my perspective as well, I think I've interviewed a lot of folks. We use the Skill Bridge program, right? But I think, again, use your networks, right? Really go out to folks that have already come into industry, or what is your passion, right? But I think also don't discredit the amazing leadership that you guys have out there and what you've done. Because sometimes when we're going through the interview process, we ask industry-like questions, you know, but you guys have done program management, you've led people, you've done all of these amazing things, you've solved complex problems, you know, strategy to tactics to action, right? Like this is what we need, what we want, right? So again, just never sell yourself short by looking at that, because I really find sometimes that, yeah, it's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, don't undervalue your worth,
Yeah,
because we have phenomenal training.
yeah,
Areas we're improving, yes, but with the life experience we have from being in the service,
yeah.
I think that's just so critically important. Also, don't carry your rank into industry. No one gives a rip. It's what you bring to the table. Okay, you know, just don't. It's not good. All right, a minute each, lightning round, closing comments.
I'd just like to thank LOA again for the opportunity to be here. It's really a joy to be here and to get to converse with you guys and offer my opinions. And again, I hope that they were encouraging and useful to you all. And if I can footstop one thing yet again, I would say, just remember that there are some awesome airmen on the outside of the Air Force who want to help the awesome airmen in the Air Force be more successful, right? We may or may not be ex-airmen, but we've got the same kind of core values, and we really do want to help you get to where you want to go. So just remember that and partner with us, and you'll be amazed at how much new and faster you can conquer. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for being so welcoming, right? I think I come from, you know, the aircraft design production side, and I've been asking a lot of questions, and everyone's been so gracious to, you know, help me kind of enter this community. I think also challenge us, right? Like challenge us to be a better industry partner and just a partner. Forget even the industry part of it, you know? So again, just really appreciate being up here with you guys, and thanks.
No, I'd also just add thanks. Thanks to my fellow panel members. Thanks to Kevin for bringing us together. He's been a great friend for a long time. I look around at the audience and I see people that I'm lucky to have gotten to know and work with over time. People that I hope I get to meet at some point. But thank you for all being here and doing what you do. I've got to say thanks to my Lockheed team and my partner Audrey Brady, who's my colleague working F-35, but the entire Lockheed team that I love working with, and really thanks to LOA. You know, events like this are again very hard to put together, but this one has been exceptionally fantastic. If that's a hyperbole, sorry about that. But it really has been great, and I appreciate what Jay has done with his leadership of LOA. I'm lucky enough to help when I can. But it really is an honor to be here. It's an honor to get to know you and work with you. And I look forward to all the things we're going to do in the future to create a better, stronger, faster, more resilient force that's not only strengthen the Air Force, but a stronger joint force, a stronger combined force. And we're going to solve this problem and keep our nation safe. So thank you very much for the time and your attention.
So I'll just wrap up by saying I too appreciate you know, folks being here today and at the symposium. Enjoy what you're doing now. Don't just keep looking for what's next. Take time to enjoy what you're doing now, because the next job will come, and you'll eventually go to the next job and the next job, and you climb in rank and so on. But enjoy your life now. Value your family that's at home and the family that we have in our community. Don't take it for granted. Enjoy what you're doing, because we are a heck of a community, and we have great jobs, and we really impact what happens in our nation. I love being here. I love being a Loggie, and I want to be your partner and be there for you whenever you need. Okay? Thank you very, very much for letting us be up here today. Appreciate it.